What's happening, everybody? James Hancock here. Just caught episode 2 of the new HBO show, The Young Pope, and my enthusiasm from last night appears to have been confirmed by yet another very, very solid episode from writer-director Paolo Sorrentino. As I mentioned in my previous video, this is a show where you have pretty much one creative voice behind the entire direction of the show, and I thought this episode was fascinating. It's going to be very hard to discuss it without giving away spoilers, so I'll just say, if you haven't seen it yet, definitely check out episode 1. I strongly recommend it. It's not going to be for everybody, but if you like political intrigue, if you like people indulging in kind of secretive, clandestine maneuvers against one another, you're going to be totally into this. And it's almost otherworldly because it takes place all within the world of the Vatican, a world that most of us will never know on an intimate level. So yeah, I strongly recommend it. Now, all spoiler warnings aside, I'm going to dive into some details. And the thing that I loved most about this was the opening sequence where they show all the various priests and cardinals and secretaries starting their day at the Vatican. And it's what makes Paolo Sorrentino such a great filmmaker. You have this one guy who's sucking on oxygen and then sucking on a cigarette. He's not even doing it himself. He has a handler administering the oxygen and the cigarettes to him. There's another one who's getting shots in the buttocks, and you got nuns playing soccer. But it's just a fascinating sequence with no dialogue, just watching the Vatican come to life at the start of the day. The main thrust of this episode is the first address that the new Pope, Pope Pius XIII, is going to be giving at the, I think it's called the St. Peter Basilica. I don't know all the full terminology. I'm still getting up to speed on all that. But the big debate is whether or not they're going to stick with previous marketing efforts, because in the past they've used the Pope's likeness to sell plates and mugs and all sorts of merchandise, and that merchandise then in turn fuels a lot of the annual budget for the Vatican and the Church's needs. But Jude Law's character, Pius XIII, he shocks everybody by basically saying that he plans on being a secretive pope in terms of his likeness and his image. And he has this fascinating lecture where he talks about who are the most important authors of the 20th century, or who are the most important filmmakers. And he goes on and on and on, and he connects this thread between a lot of these various figures about how a veil of secrecy allowed authors like J.D. Salinger or filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick to build a sense of a mystique about their work. And it definitely lent itself to their reputation becoming even more profound than just based on the work itself, because of the mysterious element of who the artist may or may not be kind of behind the scenes. And so Pius shocks everyone by saying that he plans on his likeness never being seen ever by the general public, and even when he speaks in public, that he'll do so from behind a veil of shadow or in silhouette at night, which just sends shockwaves through the entire structure of the Vatican as we know it. At the same time, we see Secretary of State Cardinal Vogliello, I believe I'm saying his name correctly, is emerging as the number one obstacle or enemy to Lenny's agenda, so to speak, because Vogliello very much is a believer in kind of the old way of doing things and using the systems that are in place, and he's mounted an investigation into Lenny, aka Pius's background, which comes up with basically nothing, apart from the fact that he has no friends and no one seems to love him, but he has no sexual orientation to speak of, and his politics and his ideas are incredibly secretive. He might have had a mentor who's on the conservative side of things, but it's amazing just how little is actually known about Lenny, apart from the fact that he devotes every waking moment to the interests and the needs of the Catholic Church. Meanwhile, we see Lenny meeting with the prefect for the Congregation of the Clergy. It's the role within the church, the training of new priests. They're having this conversation about whether or not the prefect voted for Lenny, and the prefect admits that he did not, and that the reason he did so is that he suspects Lenny of being a conservative, and this person admits that he is a homosexual and he's not a conservative and doesn't really have an enormous amount of faith in Lenny's ideas, however, that he will follow his rules, etc., and so forth. So it's interesting seeing how even though in spite of very little evidence, most people assume that Lenny is conservative because the previous Piuses have had a conservative leaning. Like I think Pius XI supported Mussolini, and also, as I said before, the mentor of Pius is on the conservative side of things. But at any rate, the reason Lenny's meeting with him and kind of feeling him out is that he's essentially trying to sabotage him so that he can create room for Cardinal Michael Spencer, played by James Cromwell, who's really pissed off that he didn't get to be the Pope himself. He felt like he's basically one of the mentors for Lenny and wanted to become Pope, and is pissed as hell that his previous apprentice has kind of overstepped him, but now we see that Lenny wants to get him back on his side. But at the same time, he's doing everything in his power to alienate people. I mean, Diane Keaton, aka Sister Mary, who's his closest friend and confidant, he kind of keeps her at arm's length by telling her to refer to him as Your Holiness, which she kind of does begrudgingly. At any rate, the episode comes to a head with the Pope finally addressing the assembled masses, and it's quite a speech, and no one quite knows how to digest it, especially the people out there. I mean, a few of the devout seem to really appreciate the spirit in which he speaks to them, but he essentially says there's not enough room in your life for anything other than complete and total adoration of God, and it's not his job to convince people why God should be a part of their lives. He has no time for people who don't already have God in their life, that essentially making himself available to those who have already found the path. And when people start to beg to see him or trying to shine lights on him, he essentially says, "You do not deserve me," and then walks off the stage. And it just leaves a lot of the people really disconcerted and kind of thunderstruck and confused, most especially the existing cardinals, like the Secretary of State, who at one point basically says he starts begging for forgiveness for all the horrible things he's going to have to do in order to save the church. So you can tell this is a confrontation or a conflict that's going to come to a head very, very quickly. I'm loving watching Jude Law continue just to wreak havoc and make enemies and second-guess people and destroy their confidence. When word gets out that somebody's basically saying that Sister Mary's the true Pope and that he answers to him, when he shows up for work the next day, he finds his name on his office door being replaced. And when he's having one meeting with his marketing expert, Jude Law's smoking away, and she asks if she can smoke as well, and he basically tells her no, and that the previous Pope, or a few popes back, John Paul II, banned all smoking. So he's kind of a bastard, but it's fun to watch a smart, devious, ambitious bastard in action. I just hope that he doesn't turn into kind of like a mad tyrant, that he remains kind of smart and clever, and that his agenda slowly emerges, because I don't know if I just want to watch a show about somebody kind of coming apart at the seams. But what's fun about the show is that it's wildly unpredictable, and I have no idea where it's going. So I will definitely be back for episode 3 next Sunday. Hope you're enjoying the show. Hope you're enjoying these reviews. I hope you will give me a subscribe on my channel. Give me a shout on Twitter at Colbrax if you want to talk more about the show or movies or games or MMA or whatever. And please check out my podcast, Wrong Reel, on iTunes. I would appreciate your support on that front. But thank you so much for watching, and talk to y'all soon.